Good morning, and welcome to Creative Living Fellowship's online Sunday service. Please join me in our opening song, Use Me.
Use me, oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. I used to think God was the sun, God is the sun, and God's so much more than the earth and the stars and all of creation. God is creator, all in all, and God needs us to shine its light as me, as you, so use me. Oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. Command my hands, what must they do? Command my life, it's here for you. God is the love that heals all creation. God is creator, makes all things new, and God needs us to shine its light as me, as you, so use me. Oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. Show me all that I must do. Show me all that I must do.
Good morning, CLF. We love you and miss you.
Blessings, CLF.
Hi, CLF. We love you and miss you.
Hola, CLF.
Greetings and salutations, CLF.
Good morning, CLF.
Good morning to our youth ministry. It's always so good to see them. And good morning to all of you. I'm the Reverend Dr. Sherry F. McCreary. I'm the senior minister here at Creative Living Fellowship. And it is my pleasure to welcome you here with us this morning. We are an independent religious science church, and we welcome all paths that lead to truth. Our vision here at CLF is to be a community of care, connection, and creation that opens hearts and incubates dreams. And we do that through the principles and practices of the science of mind. One of our practices here is holding the high watch, and we have two practitioners who are engaging in that sacred service this morning. They are Fran Peck and Rhonda Emmerich. And what that means is that they are sitting in meditation and prayerful contemplation throughout this time, just holding a space for whatever it is we may be moving through and for the perfect unfolding of this time that we spend here this day. So thank you very much for your service, Rhonda and Fran. So let's just take a breath together for a moment. Our Sunday service team, I always like to acknowledge the people who are working so diligently and so hard behind the scenes to bring the Sunday service to us to you on Sunday mornings. And they are the AV team, Nicole Jordan and Deb Covington. Deb is also our song leader. Our music director, David Panessa, who also conducts our meditation service. And our tech team today is Reverend Mary Jane Hyde. So thank all of you guys for your service here today. Coming up later, our musical inspiration is one of our favorite friends, Harold Payne. He hasn't been here with us for a while and he's back. So I'm really excited to have him back with us today also. And I'd like to just acknowledge and thank Reverend Dr. Jerry Troyer, who served as guest speaker while I had the day off last Sunday, and he did a great job. So thank you very much, Dr. Jerry. We really appreciate you being here with us last week. And I'd also like to thank practitioner Jeannie Sarverns for her debut as guest host. And well, she wasn't the guest host, she was the host for the service last week. And I was really thrilled to have Jeannie serving in that capacity. She's also a practitioner here. So thank you, Jeannie, very much for your service. So again, let's take a breath together as we move on into the service. Nicole Jordan will be bringing us our announcements. And following the announcements, there will be a brief gong wash. And after the gong wash, there'll be a few moments of silence. And then practitioner Reverend Dr. Joyce Bukers will bring us our reading and our evocation. Just allow the reading to find a resting place in your hearts and in your minds this morning and just really take it in. But first, we're going to hear the announcements from Nicole.
Good morning, Creative Living Fellowship. Are you ready for today's announcements? Your children are invited to join our youth ministry weekly for a Zoom lesson on Sundays at 12 p.m. Lessons are focused on nurturing their spirituality and science of mind practices. Weekly topics are inspired by Reverend Sherry's themes and include social emotional, growth mindset, and mindfulness practices. Don't meditate alone. Meditate with us in Zoom. Join us for midday meditation at noon, Monday through Thursday. We're still live streaming to Facebook if you prefer to meditate with us that way. Get your community care and connection on with our CLF family and Reverend Sherry every Tuesday as she hosts a Zoom meeting at 6:30. This week, Reverend Sherry will be leading Conscious Conversation. And if you would like to suggest a conversation topic or activity, please email connect@creativelivingfellowship.com. That's connect@creativelivingfellowship.com. We look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Join Fran Peck this Friday, October 30th from 5 to 6:30 for a special Halloween Yappy Hour. That's right, we're having a pet Halloween costume party. Drop in anytime you want between 5 and 6:30 p.m. and dress yourself and your pets up in your cutest or scariest costumes. Our weekly book study with Reverend Mary Jane Hyde is starting a new book on Monday, November 2nd, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Join the book study and start Hannah Hernard's, easier read than said, best known and most beloved book, Hind's Feet on High Places. A timeless allegory dramatizing the yearning of God's children to be led to new heights of love, joy, and victory. In this moving tale, follow Much Afraid on her spiritual journey as she overcomes many dangers and mounts at last to the high places. There she gains a new name and is transformed by her union with the loving shepherd. New Vision Center would like to invite you to participate in their upcoming Election Day Peace Meditations. This all-day November 3rd event will be held on Zoom to give people a place to find their calm, hold the highest and best for the nation and all individuals. Completely non-political, this will be a safe space dedicated to spiritual principle, hosted by New Vision Center for Spiritual Living and co-facilitated by NVC ministers, NVC practitioners, and Science of Mind ministers and practitioners from around the world. This event will include candle lighting ceremonies, silent meditations, prayer sessions, spiritual music, and more. We know the power of group intention and spiritual practice in 2 or more. Let's put it into action in a beautiful way this election day. Use the link in the comments or visit their website for the day schedule and Zoom link. Has this time home in quarantine been a bit boring? Are you feeling like you have no motivation, creativity, or spunk? Have you been stuck with those people? You know, your spouse, your kids, roommate, and the DoorDash driver? You need a breakthrough. Sign up now for Jeannie Sovereign's 4-week class, From Blocks and Boredom to Breakthrough. This class and at-home experiments are designed to get your spirit in the flow of Source again. Let's put this year to bed and bring on 2021 with new vitality. The time is upon us, but it's not too late to vote. Each of us has been given the precious gift of citizenship. Your vote has the power to change lives and change our country's future. We at Creative Living Fellowship are inviting you to raise your voice and to help shape our country's future by voting. Every vote counts. Early voting began on October 8th, and you can send in your mail-in ballot, go to early voting polls, or a drop box anytime until October 28th. Remember, it must arrive in time to be counted on November 3rd, or vote on November 3rd. Remember, you can use text to give to make your contributions to CLF. Simply text the amount you'd like to give to 602-610-1868. If it's your first time donating by text, you'll be sent a link to set up your account. And after that, it's as easy as texting the amount you'd like to tithe to 602-610-1868. Our Sunday prayer room is available to you after service today. There's no reason to miss out on your post-service prayer stop with a practitioner. Technology enables us to continue to provide this service to you. So immediately after service, head on over to Zoom and let one of our licensed practitioners hold the truth for you, no matter what you're going through, and offer you support through spiritual mind treatment and using spiritual practices. And we have post-service fellowship too. Join practitioner Jeannie Sovereigns in Facebook Messenger chat from 11:15 to 12:15 and hang out, discuss the service, what's on your mind or heart, or share something you're grateful for, or ask her about her upcoming class. You can find the details for all of our events with their links on our website under events, under our Facebook events, posted in the comments, or in your weekly newsletter. And that is it for today's announcements. It is now time to move on to our gong wash, followed by a moment of silence.
This morning's reading, Misplaced Faith and Understanding Faith, are excerpts from the Science of Mind textbook, pages 156 and 157. Someone has said that the entire world is suffering from one big fear, the fear that God will not answer our prayers. Let us analyze the fears which possess us and see if this is true. The fear of lack is nothing more than the belief that God does not and will not supply us with whatever we need. The fear of death is the belief that the promises of eternal life may not be true. The fear of loss of health, loss of friends, loss of property, all arise from the belief that God is not all that we claim: omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. But what is fear? Nothing more nor less than the negative use of faith. Faith misplaced. A belief in two powers instead of one. A belief that there can be a power opposed to God, whose influence and ability may bring us evil. In other words, to correct all the evils of the world would be but to have the positive faith, faith rightly placed, a faith that lays hold of the integrity of the universe, the beneficence of God, and the unity of all life. Nevertheless, we cannot have faith in that which we do not in some measure understand. We wish a faith based on the knowledge that there is nothing to fear. Faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The thought of faith molds the undifferentiated substance and brings into manifestation the thing which was fashioned in the mind. This is how faith brings our desires to pass. Will you pray with me? As I take a moment to breathe, all of us take that moment of pause. I recognize the faith, the power, and the presence of God, knowing that God is in, through, and as all of us. God is faith, God is hope, God is love. And as I am an individualized expression of that wonderful faith, hope, and love, so is everyone in this room, so is everyone in our community, so is everyone in our world. We are all part of that wonderful oneness and individualized expressions of God. So in this knowing of this awareness, I speak my word of blessings into the service. I know that the words that the Reverend Dr. Sherry McCreary will be saying this morning, will be speaking this morning, will be full of that faith and that truth. And I bless this service. I bless all those that participate in this service. I bless all those that have been affected by this, their health or financial well-being, and have looked at fear rather than faith. And I know that the blessings of this service is turning us all towards that faith, that love, and that hope. So as I pray special blessings for our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, and all of those people that are supporting us from the field, and particularly all of those that are in politics and throughout the world, that we know that the unity of love, hope, and faith are filling their hearts, their minds, and their spirits. So I can say thank you, thank you, thank you. And in gratitude and blessings, I bless this service. I bless this time together, knowing that as we move together as a community, as we move together as a unity, as we move together in faith, we feel the hope, the love of that wonderful gift of the one mind. So I simply allow it to be. And I can release in truth, I can release in faith, and I can release this service in hope, knowing that we all are very specially blessed. So we can stay together and so it is. Amen. I would now like to introduce our musician, Harold Payne.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Harold Payne.
Payne.
My great
My
pleasure
great pleasure
to be back
to be
here
back
at
here
Creative
at
Living Fellowship, albeit
albeit
virtually
virtually.
this time, where you have an abundance of talent. And I look forward to being here in person, physically next time. I'm going to do a song called No Matter What. You may get knocked down, but you get up again. Spirit renewed, and the new you begins. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Step into your greatness, stand in your light. No matter what, I will hold my vision. No matter what, I will stand strong. No matter what, I will stay on my journey. No matter how lonely, no matter how long, no matter what. You are more than enough. You have all that you need waiting inside. You just have to believe. Nothing can stop you from completing your mission. It's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. No matter what, I will hold my vision. No matter what, I will stand strong. No matter what, I will stay on my journey. No matter how lonely, no matter how long, no matter what. When a mighty wind blows, I will not be shaken. I am stronger for the winding road that I've taken. No matter what, I will hold my vision. No matter what, I will stand strong. No matter what, I will stay on my journey. No matter how lonely, no matter how long, no matter what, I will hold my vision. No matter what, I will stand strong. No matter what, I will stay on my journey. No matter how lonely, no matter how long, no matter what.
Wow, I like that song, No Matter What. Thank you so much. That was our favorite, one of our favorite friends, Harold Payne, and he'll be back with us during the offering time. But thank you so much, Harold. It's great to have you here with us this morning, and I look forward to seeing you in person again soon also. So let us all just take a breath together as we move into this part of the service where we are finishing up this month on Bloom Where You're Planted. I can't believe the month of October has flown by already. When we're talking about Bloom Where You're Planted and we're finishing that up, we've looked at how we can flower where we are, how we can bloom where we are, how we can burst into the allness and the fullness of who we were created to be, regardless of how we got where we are, how we got to where we were planted, and where we go from here, or what the outside conditions may be. We are learning to bloom where we are planted. And that's what we've been talking about all month. Today, we're talking about doing it afraid. Do it afraid. And out of all the things we've talked about, that knowing that we are whole, perfect and complete right where we are, that everything that is necessary for the full flowering is contained within us already. We've talked about moving from growing pains to growing gains. And we've talked about weeding the garden And today we talk about the biggie, which is fear, doing it afraid. Let's take a breath on that. Do it afraid. You know that there are times when fear comes up, and we just are sometimes overcome by it. Sometimes we are blocked by it. Sometimes we are stopped dead in our tracks by it, and we don't know how to handle it. And the best thing for us to do is just to take a breath, take a step back, and just move into that place of knowing and sensing and feeling God's presence right where we are, because we know that God's presence is always right where we are, always. And knowing that truth, that there's not a spot where God is not, knowing that truth, that we can never be outside the care of God. We can never depart from God's presence. We can never depart from God's care. And so knowing that truth, we still feel fear. We still have times when fear comes up, and we try to rationalize it away. We try to block it. We try to go around it. We try to ignore it. We try to deny it. We try to do all kinds of things, and it's still there. We still experience it. Ernest Holmes says, to overcome fear is the greatest adventure of the mind of man. To overcome fear is the greatest adventure of the mind of man. It is a great adventure, overcoming fear. And you know what? We don't overcome it by doing any of those things I mentioned before. We don't overcome it by trying to go around it. We don't overcome it by trying to block it. We don't overcome it by running from it. We overcome fear by going through it. We get to the other side of fear by going through it. And as scary as that sounds, imagine that, scary going through fear, uh, consciously going through fear, consciously experiencing the fear. That's how we overcome fear, by going through it. And so that's why we're talking today about doing it afraid. Do it afraid. Do it anyway. You know, there are times when we get fearful about all kinds of things. It doesn't matter whether they're big things or little things or so-called, big things, really big things that we are afraid of, or little things. Sometimes we get held back by being concerned about what somebody else thinks, being concerned about whether we're going to make somebody mad, about how we respond, how we react, how we live our lives, being concerned about being embarrassed, being concerned about not knowing enough, being concerned about failing. All of these things are the kinds of things that keep us from blooming where we are planted, that keep us from doing what is before us to do, that keep us from being all that we were created to be, because there's so many concerns that we have. And as I said, one of the big ones is being concerned about what other people think, being concerned about criticism, being concerned about acceptance by other people. Those are the kinds of things that we can allow to hold us back. And Terry Cole Whitaker wrote a whole book about what you think of me is none of my business. What you think of me is none of my business. And sometimes it's good for us to know that what other people think is really none of our business. It's their business what they think, and not allow that to be something that takes us into fear, or allowing that to be something that takes us into a place of being blocked, or takes us into a place of holding back from blooming and being all that we were created to be, living our lives the way that we are guided and led to lead our lives. And so just looking at the things that hold us back. What is it that's holding you back from doing all that you can do in this life, from being all that you were created to be? What is it that's holding you back from full expression? What is it that's holding you back from blooming to the highest, to the greatest, to the most beautiful flower that you were created to be? What things hold you back? What things are you afraid of? What are the fears? What is it that keeps you from stepping out? What is it that keeps you from speaking up? What is it that keeps you from being you? What is it that keeps you from being you? And it doesn't matter what it is, do it anyway. Be it anyway. Even with the sweaty palms, even with the racing heart, even with the trembling and the shaking, even with the heavy sweating, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, do it afraid. That's got to be our motto. Do it afraid. Keep moving forward. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. moving into the unknown, moving forward, and we're always moving into the unknown. We never know what's coming up next. Who would have thought that COVID would have happened and we would be where we are today when we started this year out, when we went through February, when we started into March? Who would have thought we'd be where we are today? So we're always moving into the unknown. And what we do is we move into the unknown, solid in our spiritual practice, solid in our awareness and our knowledge of who we are, solid in our awareness that there's only one life, there's only one power, there's only one presence, that is God's life, and knowing that that one life is my life, knowing that that one life is the life of us all, the source of us all. And so being anchored in that awareness, being anchored in that truth always is the way we move forward into the unknown. And fear still comes up, knowing this truth. Fear still comes up. Fear is a part of the human experience. It's a part of the human experience. We all feel it. We all experience it. We all run into it. Everybody does. And so what we do is just be aware of that, make it our intention, setting our intention to move through it anyway, to move through it consciously. And so I'm going to suggest that a couple of things to you, three things to you. One is to be present with the fear. Don't try to run from it. Don't try to turn and go the other way. Don't try to ignore it. Just be present to the fear. Be aware of it. Be aware of it. Be aware that feel it. Feel the fear and become acquainted with it. Become acquainted with it. Pema Chodron talks about developing an intimacy with fear, becoming fully aware of how you're feeling, becoming fully aware that you are afraid, becoming fully aware of the fact that your heart is racing, becoming fully aware that you are wondering whether you're going to survive this, whatever it is. And some things that we can be afraid of can be little things to other people, and they are so big to us that we feel like we don't know if we're going to survive this or not. And you know what? We do. And we keep moving forward, and we do. And we keep moving forward, and we do. But the important thing, as I said, is to be present to your fear. Be aware. Acknowledge I'm feeling afraid, and realize it's a feeling. It's a feeling. And so rather than just saying, I am afraid, always putting that extra word in between I am and whatever the next thing is. So I am feeling afraid. I am feeling fear. I am feeling so afraid right now. I can, and feeling my heart racing, and be mindful of where you are, what's happening with you. And this is a way of changing your thinking about fear, because the basic principle of religious science and science of mind is change your thinking, change your life. Change your thinking, change your life. We know this is the way we live our lives. Change your thinking, change your life. And so changing our thinking about fear, not being embarrassed by it, not getting into a whole thing of shame about it. I know many people do get into shame about feeling fear, about experiencing fear, about the things that they are afraid of. Change your thinking about it. Just acknowledge this is fear. This is an experience. This is a feeling that I'm having. And I know that even with this fear that I'm experiencing, even with this fear that I really want to hide behind, I really want to run away from, I really want to not have to go through this discomfort, because that's what it is. I really don't want to have to go through this thing that's really making me afraid, whatever it is. And I don't want anybody else to know that I'm afraid. That's another thing that we get caught up in. I don't want anybody to know that's how I'm feeling. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they know or not. The important thing is that you know what you're feeling, that you know what you're experiencing, and that you are developing the willingness to walk through it. You are developing the willingness to look at it, to look it in the eyes, face on, to look fear in the eye, be mindful, be present to it, be aware of where you're feeling it, be aware of how you're feeling, be aware of how you're responding, be aware of it, and face it, and then continue to move forward, because we know that you're never moving forward alone. We know that you're never walking alone. We know that even walking through the fear, God has already gone before and made straight our way. God always is right where we are, guiding us, directing us, protecting us, keeping us safe, showing us the way. And the thing for us to do is to walk forward, putting one foot in front of the other, being present to, this feels really scary. This feels really scary to me. And I know that God is right here with me. I know that God's got this. And it still feels scary. So, you know, that these two things can exist at the same time. These two things can exist at the same time. And, you know, one of the things about fear is that we try to rationalize it away sometimes. We try to go to our heads and really talk to ourselves or talk ourselves out of being afraid, talk ourselves out of feeling fear. My mother was a great rationalizer. There were so many things I was afraid of as a child. Well, some things I still am, but there were so many things I was afraid of. And my mother would always want to rationalize things to me, which made me feel worse. I can remember being afraid of a mouse, and she would say, "You're bigger than that mouse. So how could that mouse is not going to hurt you? You're bigger than it is. How could you be afraid of that? Or that bug is not going to hurt you. You're bigger than that bug." But that made no sense to me because I was still afraid of it, even though I was bigger than it was. It made no sense, but it made me feel worse because why couldn't I realize that I was bigger than it was? But you know what? Just moving through those things, because going to our heads and rationalizing doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't make any difference. Acknowledge, I'm feeling this. Yes, I know I'm bigger than that bug. Yes, I know I'm bigger than whatever this challenge is. Yes, I know I'm greater than, that God is greater than. I know all of that. And I still am feeling this fear. I still am feeling this, that I want to run from. And so taking a deep breath and just acknowledging that keeps us anchored. And then we can begin to look at, okay, now what's the next step? Now that I'm acknowledging, here's all this fear, what's the next step? Importantly, the next step is to be compassionate with yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. When you find that you are still feeling the fear, when you find that is totally irrational, when you find that there's no way that to get around it, that you can't run away from it, that you got to deal with it, be compassionate with you. Be compassionate with you. Accept the fact that this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing right now. I'm accepting myself just as I am right here and right now. I know that God is right where I am right now. I'm feeling this fear right now, and I'm accepting that. And another way of being compassionate with ourselves is not to compare ourselves with anybody. You know, my commandment, those of you who've taken classes from me know that my commandment is always, thou shalt not compare. Thou shalt not compare. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to how other people handle particular situations. Don't compare yourself to how someone may be handling the same situation that you're dealing with. Because you know what? We don't know how other people feel. We don't know how other people deal with fear. We don't know whether they are dealing with fear. We don't really know, because what we're doing is judging our insides by their outside. We're judging how we're feeling inside by how they appear outside. And we make assumptions for how somebody is feeling outside. And then that makes us feel bad about how we're feeling inside. How somebody's appearing outside, we make assumptions by that and we judge it, how we're feeling inside based on that. That's not fair to us. Being compassionate with ourselves. Being compassionate with ourselves, not moving into shame. Fear is nothing to be ashamed of. Fear is nothing to feel guilty about. Fear is nothing to be embarrassed about. Fear just is a feeling that comes up. And the recognition of that helps us to move through it much more easily, much more effortlessly. Even with the sweaty palms and the beating heart, racing heart, we can move through the fear much more easily with compassion. We can move through the fear much more easily with self-acceptance. We can move through the fear much more easily when we just allow ourselves to feel it and move through it and give ourselves a pat on the back, say, you know what, you're doing a good job of moving through this. You know what, you're doing a good job of handling this. And taking a breath and really, really feeling that self-compassion. And that if there are times when we have not been as compassionate as we would like to have been, moving into self-forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for falling short, Forgiving ourselves for beating up on ourselves when we felt the fear, trying to talk ourselves out of it or beat ourselves out of it. Forgiving ourselves for that, and then moving back into that place of acceptance. This is how we bloom where we are planted. This is how we really begin to flower into all that we were created to be. When we can just move into that place of compassion, self-love, self-forgiveness, and recognizing that God is in the midst of it all, that God is in the midst of it all, even as we go through this, and turning back into that place of, yes, having faith, knowing that we have faith. We know that we have faith, and we still feel afraid. And so just balancing the two, because as I said before, the two can coexist. You can have faith and still feel fear. And when you recognize that you're feeling the fear, being compassionate as you walk through it. The third thing that I want us to keep in mind and to really practice is doing it afraid. The third thing is do it afraid. Yes, we know. Yes, I know that I'm afraid. Yes, I'm feeling all this fear. Yes, I'm wondering, will I survive this? Yes, I'm wondering, will I survive this? Because sometimes the fear can be so great that it feels lethal. It feels like there's no way we can survive it. It depends on what's underneath the fear. That's the degree to which we can walk through it easily, the degree to which we can move beyond it, the degree to which we can do it afraid, much more easily, depends on what's behind it. It depends on what's creating all the discomfort about it. And some things are bigger than other things. But whatever it is, just knowing that doing it afraid is the way that we walk through it. I'm afraid and I'm walking through this anyway. Because sometimes we have to be open to being, to allowing ourselves to be led where we are being led, without knowing what's the reason, without knowing what's the purpose, without knowing what's going to be on the other side of it. Because we know that God is always guiding us. We know that God is always directing us. We know that God is always showing us the way. We know that God has a greater vision for our lives. We know that God has a greater vision for each one of us, and how it wants to show up as each one of us. And when we know this, even when we are afraid, we allow ourselves to move through that fear, to do it afraid, to get to the other side of it, because God has already knows what it looks like on the other side. God has a plan. God has a vision of what our lives look like on the other side of it. God already knows this. And so one of the big things that happens when we do it afraid is we develop our trust muscle. We develop our trust muscle. We have faith. Yes, we have faith. We know that God is right where we are. We know that God is guiding us. God is directing us. We know all this. That's our faith, that God is always right where we are. But the trust is the thing that we have to really move into. Letting go and letting God. I think I've told you this before. Now it bears repeating. One of my first religious science ministers many years ago told us the difference between trust and faith. The difference between trust and faith, and he analogized it to a trapeze artist. And he said, when a trapeze artist is swinging back and forth on the trapeze and having faith that the other one is going to be there, the artist is swinging back and forth and swinging back and forth and swinging back and forth, knowing that she's going to turn to the other bar and swing, and has faith that the other bar will be there. But the trust is in letting go of the bar she's holding. The trust comes in letting go of the bar she's holding. The faith is to swing on the bar, know that I'm going to turn, know that the other bar is going to be there. That's where faith is. Trust is letting it go. Letting it go. And so that's what we do when we do it afraid. We let go. We take our hands off it. We take our hands off and trust and know that God's got this. Whatever it is, God's got this. God's got this. I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know why I'm being guided this way. I don't know why I'm being directed this way. I don't know why I'm being led this way. And I know God's got this. I know God's got this. And so I'm going to let go and let God. Now that's a lot easier said than done. That's a lot easier. It sounds, I can make it sound really easy. I have had a lot of fears in my life. I still have a lot of fears in my life. I still do many, many things afraid. I still do many, many things afraid. It's not doing things afraid is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the faint of heart. But blooming where you're planted is not for the faint of heart. Trusting is not for the faint of heart. It's because when we're thinking that this is something that we have to do ourselves, it's not for the faint of heart. Trusting, doing it afraid, trusting God, doing it afraid, trusting God, it sounds really easy. And you know what? It isn't always. The trust part, yes. But the trust part that requires you to let go, yes. Because the other part of trust is when you're saying I trust God and you're still holding on, you're not really trusting God. You're not really totally trusting, but to totally trust and to take your hands off and to say, okay, I'm here. Okay, God's got this. Okay, I don't have to hold on. I don't have to control this. I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I'm trusting that I'm being led into this great adventure, this great thing called life. I'm being guided into this great thing called life. And then when we get to the other side of it, we get to see all that we get to see. We get to see the glory of it. We get to see the glory of God's got this. We get to see the outcome. We get to see all that. But that's not until we've gone through it. That's not until we've already done it. You know, whenever I think about doing it afraid, as I was preparing for this talk, I was reminded of many years ago. Well, I grew up in Alabama. I grew up in the South, and there were always older people who would sit around and talk about things that would scare the little kids. That would be really, really scary. And one of the things that I grew up in a house that was right across the street, directly across the street from a block-long cemetery, block square cemetery. And I was always afraid of death, dying, anything having to do with death, anything having to do with dead people, because I always heard stories about ghosts and people coming back. And those were the old stories that people would tell kids to frighten them, and that older kids would tell the little kids to scare them. And so whenever there was a funeral in burial in the cemetery across the street, I had an older foster sister, and she lived with us, and she would tell us that she would tell me, because I was the next one in line to her. She would tell me that whoever it was that was buried there was going to come to our house and knock on the door and ask for a glass of water at night. That would just scare me so bad. And I would be afraid to go to sleep because I was afraid the people were going to come from the cemetery over to the house. And my mother would always say, don't you know that if those people could get up, they would go home. They would not come looking for you. Well, that was the way she rationalized that. But that didn't make sense to me. It didn't matter to me. I was still scared to go to bed at night. I was still afraid to close my eyes. I was still afraid that the people were going to come, that there were ghosts around. And so growing up with that kind of fear, and then we had a next door neighbor who liked to play practical jokes. And one night my sister and I had been to a store up the street, and we were coming back, and the street light had blown out, and we were just coming down the hill to go to our house, and the neighbor came out from behind one of the tombstones with a sheet on and scared us, and we went running and screaming. And I would never forget that because it was so scary. My parents were not happy at all. They didn't think it was funny at all. But that's another whole Oprah show. But at any rate, that was one of the things that really, really stayed with me for a long time, that fear of death, that fear, and not a fear of dying myself so much as a fear of the dead, a fear of anything that was paranormal, anything that spoke of ghosts or something that was beyond life on this plane that I could see. That was a great, great fear that I grew up with. And so I was always afraid to be around funeral homes and any death of any kind of experience of death. And fast forward to many, many years later, I was taking classes at a place in New York, and I would go there once a month on the weekends. And I would this place, there was a lot of talk in this one place about the ghosts and haunted houses and different things like that. And there was this one place that I stayed when I would go there to. It was a beautiful house, but it was a haunted house. It was reputed to be a haunted house, but there were always other people there when I went, and so I I did okay in staying in my room. I did okay because there were other people around. I was afraid, but I was able to go and do what I was supposed to do and be okay with it. And then there was one weekend that I went to the retreat, and I was supposed to stay in this house where I always stay. And as I said, it was a beautiful house, 2-story house. And my bedroom that I stayed in was all the way up on the second floor and all the way down the last room on the end. And when I got there this particular weekend, the people who owned the house had left me a note that they were out of town, um, and they would be gone the entire weekend, that I'd be in the house by myself because there were two people who had planned to be there also, and they had canceled their plans. And so that meant that I was going to stay there for 2 nights alone. Now, this house was supposed to be a haunted house, and I was fine going in when I first got there because it was daytime, and I went in and I put my bags down, I got my room situated and all, and then I went off to the classes and the meditations and the retreat activities that I was going to be involved in. And the closer it got to being dark, the more I started to think about the fact that I had to go back into this house and stay there alone, and I was really, really terrified. But I kept taking breaths, and I was ashamed to tell anybody that I was afraid to go. And I finally mentioned it to one of my instructors that I was really afraid to go and stay at this house. And he said, why don't you, what? He said, I can walk you over there, or you can come to our house and stay. But there was something that made me think that I wasn't supposed to run away from this, that I was supposed to go through this experience, as scary as it was, as terrified as I was, to be going into this haunted house to stay by myself overnight. It was quite scary. But I made up my mind that I would go anyway. I made up my mind that I was going to do this anyway. And so I did have him walk me to the house that I was going to stay in. Um, and I went in and turned the lights on and went on upstairs to my room. And I was pretty scared. I was pretty scared, but I thought, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to turn these lights off. I'm going to go to bed. Everything's going to be fine. And I don't think that I've ever experienced as much fear in my life as I felt that night. Being in that dark house, I didn't hear any sounds. I kept waiting to hear things. I kept waiting to see something, some paranormal activity take place. I kept waiting for a ghost to come. But the fear that I felt was almost unbearable. The fear that I felt, my heart racing. There were times when I thought I was just not going to survive this. There were times when I really went through uh, an extreme amount of fear. And I was determined that I was just going to be with it. So I breathed, I prayed, I meditated, and I was still feeling all this fear. And I made it through the night. This is what I called really looking in the eyes of fear, really experiencing all the fear, really thinking that there was no way I could breathe through this, really thinking there was no way I was going to live through this. And waking up, I finally I dropped off to sleep at some point and woke up the next day and it was daylight, and I was really amazed that I had lived through that experience because it was just almost overpowering, the experience of the fear. But I knew something else had happened. I knew something had shifted within me. I knew that something had changed, something shifted. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I had gotten beyond something. I knew that there was something different, and I'm not sure that I was consciously aware of it at the time, so much as just being aware that and thankful that I had lived through the night because I didn't think that I would. So I went on into the activities of the day, and the next night I went back and I stayed in the same house by myself. And I didn't have as much fear. I still had a little trepidation, but I didn't have as much fear. And as I said, I wasn't quite sure what had happened, but I knew that something had changed, something had shifted. And it was a few years later that I began to realize that there was a part of me that had died to the old, a part of me that there had been a death. I was afraid that I was going to die that night from fear. And there was the old that died away. There was the old that just died. And I didn't realize it until I went forward in my life. And a few years later, I decided to stop practicing law and moved to California. And I became a hospice chaplain. A hospice chaplain. Anybody who knew me was shocked that I was a hospice chaplain, because that meant that I had to deal with the one thing that I'd been so afraid of, that was death and being around the dying and the dead. And so what I realized, that once I became a hospice chaplain, I realized that that's what had died, my fear, my fear. And I began to understand more and more about eternal life, what eternal life is all about. I talked about eternal life. I had been studying religious science for a long time. And I truly believe in the eternality of life. But there was that whole thing about death and dying that I didn't even realize, that just had me just tied up in knots. And once I went through that night, that night of terror that I had in walking through and facing that fear that I had of being in a haunted house and being around ghosts and being around death or someone who had died, and all that just died away. All that just fell away. And it was all because I was willing to do it afraid. I was willing. I could have stayed at somebody else's place. I could have stayed in the car all night. I could have done so many different things rather than staying in that house by myself that night. But if I had not stayed in that house by myself that night, I would not have had the opportunity to follow the guidance that I was receiving, to follow the path that I was being led on by God, who had gone before me already, who already knew that I was going to be a hospice chaplain, who already knew that I was going to be a full-time minister, who already knew that I'd be dealing in so many ways with the eternality of life, with death and dying, and with all those issues that had terrified me for so many years. All that had fallen away because I spent that night in that room. I spent that night in that room and walked through, faced that fear and walked through it. I did it afraid. And that's one of the things that I really, really am so grateful for, that I did it afraid, that I did it afraid. And so I encourage you, do it afraid. Be willing to be led through the fear. Be willing to be led to your next place, your next spot, because we are always being led. We're always being cared for. Be willing to trust God, to know more. Be willing to trust God, to have it. When you say God's got this, just do it afraid, say God's got this, and keep moving forward, because that's what's really, really important for us to do. And so in blooming where you're planted, I invite you, whatever it is that's holding you back today, whatever it is that you are really, really afraid to move forward on, whatever it is you are or holding back about, whatever it is that's keeping you from living life to the fullest and being all that you were created to be, whatever it is, make up your mind to do it afraid. Make up your mind to be a participant in your own life, not to be a bench warmer, not to sit back, not to hold back, but make up your mind to do it afraid, to live life to the fullest, because that's what we're here for, to be those full places and spaces through which God can express to the fullest. Be intentional in moving through your life. And when you come into a roadblock of fear, recognize it as fear, feel the fear, identify it as fear, take a deep breath and trust God and do it afraid. And so I invite you now, let's just take a breath together as we just turn within in this moment. Just turn within into this place where we can breathe. Just feeling into this moment. And if there's fear that you're feeling in this moment, just breathe into it. and breathe through it. If there's something that's holding you this morning, holding you back, just take a breath and breathe into that place of fear. Acknowledge it, release it, and know that even in the midst of the fear that you're feeling about whatever it is, God is in the midst of it. And just recognizing that there's but one power, there's but one presence, there's but one breath, there's but one activity, there's but one life. That is God. This day, we are each made in the image and likeness and out of this one itself. And so just knowing this truth for each of us, I speak this word this day. I speak this word for each of us to bloom as where we are planted, to bloom, to be all that we were created to be. I speak this word for each of us to release and let go of those things that would block us in any way, of those things that would hold us back in any way. I speak the word for each of us to stand in the knowing that God is right where we are always, and that healing presence of God is moving in and through and as our lives right here and right now. In and through and as our lives right here and right now. Just speaking a word of healing of our body temples, any healing that needs to have, anything that appear to be out of order, anything that appears to be unlike that perfect, whole, and complete presence of God. Anything is dissolved into nothingness. And I'm just knowing that every organ, cell, tissue, function of our body temples are filled with God's loving, radiant presence, God's healing presence. And so this word goes out to anyone who needs a prayer this day for healing in the body temple, for healing in the body of affairs, for any appearance of lack and limitation. Just knowing that the wholeness and the fullness of God is right where each person is, right here and right now. This prayer goes out into this world for peace and harmony, where there is a need for peace and harmony. Anything that is unlike that peace, anything that is unlike that harmony, anything that is unlike that joy, anything that is unlike that wholeness and that fullness of God is dissolved by the word that's being spoken right here and right now. This word goes out to anyone who's experiencing loss of any kind, just knowing that God is in the midst. The great comforter is in the midst of everything that's going on. Those whose lives are affected by COVID, loss of a loved one, experiencing it themselves, just knowing that God is in the midst. God is healing everything. God is in the midst of everything. God is comforting. God is lifting up. God is all there is. And so we just stand in this place right here and right now, taking a breath together and just knowing that each breath is a healing breath. Each breath is a loving breath. Each breath lifts us up into that place of oneness with the all that is. And so I just pause momentarily now so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer. You may speak their names silently or loud, and you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I know that God is right where each of them is, right here, right now, blessing, keeping, healing, lifting up, comforting, loving, guiding, directing, protecting. I know that God is, and that all indeed is well. This prayer goes out to anyone, anywhere, needing a prayer. Every situation and circumstance, God is in the midst of it all. In the midst of every event, God is. And so I just say thank you, Father, Mother God, for the healing that's happening. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for the blessings of our lives and the blessing that we are to life as we move forward from this place. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for everything. And I simply allow it to be. And so it is. Thank you, David. And so now is our conscious giving and receiving time. This is our offering time, the time that we give of our tithes and offerings here at CLF. And I invite you to join us in the sacred practice of tithing, because CLF is a tithing church, and we invite you to join in that practice with us by pressing the donate button, clicking on the donate links on the comments or on our Facebook page or on our website. You can also donate by texting to give on using your cell phone or your smartphone. And however you give, however you donate, we want you to know how much we really appreciate your contributions, how much we appreciate your continued financial support. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. So why don't we now just move into our offering blessing. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God. And so it is. And now, here's Harold Payne again.
Living in the I don't know. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. The art of uncertainty is a new paradigm. Leaving all our baggage and preconceived notions behind. Standing at the edge of what is to be. Stepping into the unknown consciously and intentionally. That's when we're living in the I don't know. Loving it. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. Every day of our life is a chance to learn and grow. In fact, I've made a living out of making it up as I go. Whether you're pushed by desperation or pulled by inspiration, you can learn to let go and follow your highest vibration. You're living in the I don't know. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. When we learn to lose our fear of the unknown, we are free to live in the present, completely at home. Just living in the I don't know and loving it. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. Oh, living in the I don't know. And loving it. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. Oh, we're living in the I don't know. And loving it.
Thank you so much, Harold. It's so great to have you back with us again, and we look forward to having you back again real soon. So let's take a breath together. I just have a few closing announcements this morning. Just reminding you that the youth ministry meets at noon today. I know that this is football season, and for parents, maybe you can drop your kids off in the Zoom room and still keep up with the football games. It would be great to have them back together again with the youth ministry at 12 o'clock today. Also, the Zoom prayer room is open immediately after service, and don't miss the opportunity to have a prayer, one-on-one prayer with practitioner in a private Zoom room. You can also, as you know, email Practitioner Core with a prayer request at prayer@creativelivingfellowship.com. And the practitioners pray over your prayer requests for the next 30 days. Or you can call a practitioner. We have on-call practitioners who are listed in the comments and also on our website. So you don't have to miss the opportunity to have prayer, because this is a time that prayer is always needed, but this is a time that we can all use more and more prayer, more and more prayer. So take advantage of the opportunity to have a practitioner pray with you and pray for you. Don't forget that Jeannie Sovereign's practitioner has the fellowship time right after service today. So there's a great time to stop and have fellowship together with other members of our community and with Jeannie Sovereign's immediately after. Yappy Hour, Halloween, don't forget that. For the Animal Chaplain Fran Peck is sponsoring our monthly happy hour, but now it's going to be Halloween Yappy Hour. So bring your pets and dress them up in Halloween costumes if you want. I can't wait. I act like I have pets. I show up every month for Yappy Hour so that I can see the pets who are there. Those members, the four-legged members and no-legged members of our congregation, of our community. So show up for Yappy Hour. That'll be a great time at 5 o'clock on Friday, October 30th. Tuesday evening, we have our connection meetings. This week, we have Conscious Conversation. It's a great time that we get together as a community. I continually ask you to come out and join us. That's how we stay connected, by continuing to see each other and talk to each other and talk about things that are meaningful to us. So we'll be doing that this week. I'd love to see you at the Community Connection at 6:30. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to, you can start with as Nicole announced at the very beginning, we can start with the mail-in voting goes through October 28th. So don't forget that, or you can vote in person on the 3rd, as you know. The treatment for supply, our community prayer, we continue to do that each and every day, sometimes twice a day if you can, but certainly once a day, continuing to pray the treatment for supply, knowing that it is comprehensive and it is really, really working in our lives. And we want to continue that. And most importantly, connecting with each other. Continue to make those phone calls and send those cards and letters and text messages and reaching out to each other and saying, hello, how are you? I'm thinking of you. I love you. I can't wait for us to get together. I can't wait to see you. And just really connecting, because we are a community of connection. And you know what? It is so important for us to stay connected at this time. It is so important for us to reach out at this time. It is so important for us to let others know that we're thinking of them and to find out that others are thinking of us. And so I think of you all. I reach out when I can, and and particularly when someone comes to mind, and I pray for all of you, and I love you all so much. So until next week, thank you for joining us today. Take good care, be well, be safe. Much love to you all. And now we'll have our closing song, our release.
I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life.